Welcome to 30 Minutes. I'm Rick Anthony. About 20 years ago, I met a young man who taught filmmaking and screenwriting at a local university. He was also instrumental in establishing a program for students with special needs to help them adapt to student life. He also taught them filmmaking and television production. One of those students stood out, a paraplegic who, with a pencil clenched between his teeth, pecked the keys of his computer to write a complete screenplay. It took him 7 years. Those were the kinds of stories of individual against-the-odds heroism and grit that inspired Professor Steve McWilliams, now retired, to give so much of himself to help others, and to produce award-winning documentaries to highlight the achievements of young men and women who excelled despite their disabilities. Perhaps the pinnacle of Steve's life story was the role he played for 20 years as a member of the small team of volunteers who cared for Father Bill Atkinson, the paraplegic seminarian who went on to become the first paraplegic ordained Catholic priest. Father Bill is up for canonization now, and Steve has been part of the Vatican's investigation into Father Atkinson's life. In fact, Steve wrote a book, Green Bananas, about Father Bill, with whom he established a close relationship before he died. Welcome, Steve.
Wow. Good.
Thanks to 30 Minutes.
Thanks
here
for
at MLTV. Good. It's always good to see you.
Good to see you.
I guess we have had contacts over the years.
Many.
While you were at the university. And since there's so much to talk about with you. But why don't we begin with the program you established at the local university for children, students with disabilities. It started small, but it has certainly blossomed since. What was the impetus for that?
It was like everything else. Every good thing that happens is a complete accident. And this was a complete accident. Back in 1990.
There are no accidents.
No, there isn't, but when the initial impulse was not intentional. In 1994, I was kind of minding my own business, and Father Dobbin, who was then president of the university, contacted me on, I think it was in March. We had an ice storm, and I'll never forget. And he said, "Oh, come in my office when the ice thaws. I have something I want to talk to you about." And the American with Disabilities Act had just been passed, and he knew I had a relationship with Father Bill Atkinson. So he said, "Hey, I need somebody to kind of take care of disabled students that come to Villanova. We don't really have any program. With this law passed, I think we're going to probably have more. And I don't think the university's really prepped for that occasion." So he said, "Would you do it as a volunteer till I decide what to do? Just take care of it." And he said, there was only, at the time, probably 15 students maybe. There weren't many. And those disabilities there was a cross-section from moderate to severe, and only a handful of severe ones. And I was
physical as well as mental.
Yeah. But as I told you earlier, back then, before '94, before the law was passed, a lot of students that had disabilities or lived with disabilities didn't come to college. They were in special schools. They were segregated. What the law did was, give the opportunity for families to say, you can mainstream your student in the public school system, and parents did. They sued school districts for services, and there's a whole population came in, and then those people came of age and wanted to come to college. Well, private colleges weren't really, I don't know if public universities weren't either, but private colleges weren't really set up for it. So I said, sure, I'll do it. And I had started out as just, okay, a couple months, and it turned into a passion, and I was able to do my other job there, and I did this as a kind of a side thing, and the longer I stayed, the more interesting the job became, the more time I devoted to it, and then ultimately it led to so many opportunities. Ultimately, and you're going to talk about the next thing, it culminated in a lot of this great students who have never been in college graduating and moving on. So we have a great legacy of, you were talking about the student that made Frankie Kanivi, who wrote the screenplay. We had kids that were nonverbal that graduated. We had kids with cerebral palsy, blind students, deaf students. And that's a big commitment for the university to take on. You got to figure that not everybody has that kind of experience. No one's trained in it. So it basically had to happen on the fly. And you had to recruit a lot of really good people who understood what that situation involved. And we were lucky. And I had great support along the way from a lot of faculty. People who took things on. I mean, you imagine if you're a faculty member and a guy walks in, he's got a board, a communication device. He doesn't speak. He's got spastic CP, and I put him in your classroom. And you've never had that kind of experience. Right. So there were so many of those moments where.
Did you find that this fellow students were empathetic, were supportive?
I think everybody.
Because it should have been a learning experience for them.
It certainly was, and I think if you give everybody that chance and experience, and everybody has that experience, and I think people are sometimes fearful of the unknown.
Sure,
but as time went on, we ended, there were several of us. This guy Greg Hannock came to work for me, Matt Marincic, my Debbie Hubert Weinstein. I had people in my office who were just quality people, and the office became like a community and a hangout. And then we started a volunteer group, probably, got to be 15 years now. Level it was called, and I would say able-bodied folks volunteered their time to do academic support for people that didn't have physical capability to do it. So it turned out to be a beautiful thing, and it's still going on today, still going strong. So and again, it benefited me. I benefited. I got an education along the way that I didn't expect. So I just make it clear. I knew nothing when I started. Still don't, but I had to rely on a lot of other people to make it happen.
I mentioned the one student you had told me about,
Frankie, Frank Canevia. Yeah.
But you've told me other stories. The blind golfer.
Yeah.
You did a documentary.
Yeah, right? I did. But he didn't go to Villanova. But my wife's cousin is blind, and I brought him into school, and took him 10 years. He got his associate's degree after 10 years. So, and he's a golfer as well. But I've got so many great stories, and they're all the stories that we were talking earlier about. Never judge a book by a cover. There's always, like you were talking about your grandson, and people will write that off. But I think if you peel the onion away, you're always going to find gold. Well,
these people inspired you to do several documentaries, didn't you?
Sure.
About people with special needs.
Yep.
And you've won some awards for some.
Sure.
Of that.
So, we did the student you're talking about, Frank Canevia and Nick Gaynor, who were two. They came into school at the same time. Nick's father, Michael, who just passed, sadly, one of my close friends. He was the director of admissions of Villanova. So his son came in, Nikki was also the manager of the girls' basketball team at Villanova. If you ever go to the girls' games, you'll see Nikki on the sideline, and the men's lacrosse team. Frankie and Nikki were at the same time. And I had the idea, I said, for the very reason we're talking, nobody really understood these students. I said, let's make a movie. I got the class together. I said, let's do a story on these guys. And it turned out to be an incredible hit. And the impetus was to show people that these students are here, and that they were, and to humanize it, and give people understanding. And that was the goal. And the film went on ESPN. It was covered in New York Times, Good Morning America. I mean, it was really some hit. And we really, and those two students really, they changed the dynamic of the school. I think that project did. I think up until that point, I think people got it after that film. And
it was a program which is now called V United.
No, V United is a special program. It's a side thing that we. That's for students with intellectual disabilities, and that happened not through me. That was two students came to me and said, "Hey, this was probably 2010 maybe. Two students came, very, and I can't. For my senioritis is their names escape me. Morgan, and Mimi. Mimi Gaber were her name. Morgan went to med school. I can't think of her last name. But they came up and said, we'd like to do something for intellectually disabled students in the community. We have Special Olympics here, but that's one day a year. We'd like to do something. So we started doing a Saturday program, Saturday morning. It was like a life skills program that we started. And they ran it. And I just supported them. And I gave them ideas. I gave them organization, gave them a place to do it. Well, we started that the first year with probably 15 students. And we had about 20, 25 volunteers. that mushroomed to about 80 students and 100 and some volunteers.
Wow.
And then what has happened to people from all over the community, tri-county, tri-state area, kids from Delaware, Allentown, New Jersey, people would come on Saturday morning, and it was as much social.
So these were not necessarily
They weren't
Villanova
Villanova students. No, these were just people in the community. So that was called the United, and then that happened for several years. So many people heard about it that we couldn't accommodate everybody. We had so many people coming and their parents.
Mm-hmm.
They would come and it would go from Saturday from 9 to 1:30, 2 o'clock, and they student run classes on nutrition. We do physical activity, yoga. They were just a kind of a fun 3 hours of instruction. It was all student driven. Well, it got so successful. The parents were all saying, it'd be great if you could do something more, like something that's really institutionalized. At the same time, there's a couple up in Boston, Cape Cod, Tom and Terry Murphy, and another woman, Martha Murray, who works for their foundation. They had contacts with Villanova somehow. So they reached out to me and said, we'd like to do some kind of organized program for students with intellectual disabilities on a Catholic campus. So I said, okay, well, let's see what we can do. I said, unless you're going to fund it, I don't think anybody's going to just start that out of the blue. Tom Murphy agreed to give the seed money for it. And then I was on the spot. So I went to the Dean of Professional Studies, Dr. Christine Pallas, very great lady, and a woman, especially a lady, right? I went to Christine, and she liked the idea. And she said, well, let's do it. So we put a proposal, and we started that. And it became an idea of just a certificate program where students would come and live on campus, and they would be integrated in the community. And they would have access to everything else as students. They could join clubs, join teams, whatever they qualified for, and they could live on campus with their peer group. So the first year, I think we took 6 or 7, and of course, now a couple of them work here. They've done interns here. So that program, and then when I retired, Molly Sean took it over, and another woman by the name of Mary Beth Abioli, she really helped me. She was a big impetus.
Is that separate from the program you started?
Yeah, that was. So
these are running concurrently?
They're running concurrently, but under the same umbrella.
Yeah.
It just made sense to do it under our office. But Mary Beth and Molly they were the movers and shakers that really got off the ground.
The second one, though, the more recent one, the United.
Well, they called that.
I think 2 years ago.
That's called Reunited Scholars.
Okay.
We took the feeder. Some of the kids on the Saturday program, you had to qualify because you had to be able to live independently on your own in this dorm. So the population wasn't going to be, all these people on Saturday weren't going to qualify. So there had to be an admission process, which we instituted. And it's worked out incredibly. I mean,
is that a mix of disabilities? Because the young students I met, I believe 2 of them had Down syndrome.
Yeah.
But you have people with autism, all mixed together?
Yeah, all mixed together. And they're taught special classes. There's a whole curriculum and the goal of that program is to get them a higher level of employment, get them in the community,
right.
Get companies to see the value in it, and get them good jobs. I mean, there's a huge unemployment rate in this population, huge. So
what's the curriculum for that certificate program?
There's obviously there's personal finance. There's regular academic subjects, history, writing.
All right.
There's a theology course by Father Alan Fitzgerald. He teaches that. There's a filmmaking class, as you alluded to earlier, with John Ricciuti from here. I think he's still doing it. What else? I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there's music, there's technology. So I think during the week, I think there's probably 3 to 4 classes a day, 5 days a week.
Okay, but there's no vocational training in the program.
No. There's an entrepreneurial class that they.
There is.
Yeah, and then one of the big parts is on 1 day a week they go out for an internship for the entire day, and you're hoping that that's going to develop into a relationship, and they're going to go back to that a couple times.
How long has that program been in place? So you have graduates.
Yeah, it's just.
What are some of them doing?
Well, I really kept up on all of them, but I know a couple. One guy, a couple of them are working where we started them. One guy was working at the Museum of Natural History in Philadelphia, and I think he's still there. One guy worked for the Phillies. One guy worked for the Wilmington Blue Rocks. He wanted to be in sports. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we had so many good employers came to front. A couple, and the natural places. I mean, one guy worked in horticulture in a garden center. Another guy worked in an arboretum. I can't think of all. I used to drive him around. So a couple worked here. And we really, at the beginning, we were just looking for people who got what we were trying to do and wanted to be part of it. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it's not rocket science. You just have to pound it. You have to pound the pavement. You got to sell it, and you got to get people to buy into it. And like Kevin, your own Kevin at this place, he was just terrific. Right. And I'm telling you, guys like him, like you just know they're out there. You have to find them. But we were blessed to do that.
Now, is that a one-off, or are there other programs in other schools like it?
I think a lot of schools are doing it. Yeah, it's a market. It's a market. Don't forget, if there's people going to pay, schools are the demographics. If enrollment dips, then they're always looking for. It's a college, but it's also a business, so they're always looking for other revenue streams. And I think it's another good thing about it. It is something to be proud of that as an advancement office can pitch to donors.
It's something you should be proud of, because 2 years ago, I think it won an award.
Yeah, I got an award from the Archdiocese. Yeah, we were. That was, and again, that's icing on the cake. But the satisfaction is to see it going on. It's stronger than it's ever been, and there's more interest in it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just the future looks great for it. And it does. I think the parents would tell you that, it's, and I don't want to get too heavy and heartfelt about it, but it's gives people, and you talked about your own family situation where you're fighting for things. If you have a child with special needs and you're fighting all the time, Absolutely. It's exhausting. So to have somewhere you're welcomed, people welcome you, you're part of a community that people were historically excluded from. That's progress, and I think that's the thing I'm most proud of is that people have hope, and whatever. I hope every school does it, but I think the fact that, and again, I don't want to take any credit for it, because there were so many people involved that it was just I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I think, and I had the opportunity. There's a lot of people didn't have that opportunity that came my way, and I was fortunate.
As long as I know you, you've been self-deprecating. You don't take credit for anything.
Well, I think it's.
I know that other people helped.
But so I think I'll say this. I probably could have said I'm too busy.
Yeah,
I could have. Yeah. But once you're involved, you get involved with these families. You're deeply involved, and your awareness kicks in. Wow, how did that happen? And how come that didn't happen to me? And I go back to what we were talking about earlier. What's your moral center tell you is basically you've got to be present to people, and if you can move the ball along, you do.
I had one small speck of your experience. I've been a catechist in my parish for sixth graders. Help me, God help me.
That's when they're getting crazy.
I have taught at the college. I taught in prison.
Right.
I've taught at the college level, and I've taught at the high school level. Sixth grade is harder than any of them.
My wife is a teacher. She'll tell you the same thing. This week,
one of the students who has autism came up to me, and he was a good student. He studied. He knew the answers. He participated, but he gave me a hug, and he said, "Thank you." I wrote his mother and told her what a wonderful young man he was. He is. It really gets to you.
Yeah. It's a beautiful career.
And it makes it all worthwhile.
It's a beautiful career. Yeah, and I had champagne every day.
As I said in the intro, if not the pinnacle, one of the highlights of your life had to be the 20 or so years you spent with Father Bill Atkinson. I've heard that story. I've heard you tell it before. But repeat it now, please, about how it started, all the years that you were going through the motions, but you weren't really engaged, and then all of a sudden you and he became best friends?
Yeah, well, again, accident. I ran into a friend.
No, there are no accidents.
I ran into a friend of mine years ago, probably 80. I've been married. I had a baby, or I just had a newborn. I was probably around 83, 84. 83, and I knew this guy, Rich Heron, who I didn't know at the time was Bill's nurse, but we had been friends, and he said, hey, and I knew Bill Atkinson. I had been in the Augustinians for a while, so I certainly knew Bill Atkinson. I knew his family. But he said, would you help get Bill Atkinson? We need some, caretakers in the morning to get him out of bed.
He's a seminarian at this point.
No, Rich is just his nurse. He's just volunteered too. So,
Bill was
a priest at this time.
Oh, he was at that
yeah,
point?
so
Okay.
So Rich said, would you volunteer? And I'm a Catholic school kid, so always say yes, sister, yes, sister, I'll do it. and thinking like, well, I'll do it for a while, and they'll find somebody else. And I always, you heard me say it. I'm a kind guy, but I have an expiration date. And I figured, well, I'll say yes. And I didn't know where my life was going. I just had a baby. I was all over the place, as you know, your first kid.
Oh yeah.
So I'm up all night. So I start, and it's just one of those things. It's just I got in the flow, and I just showed up and did it
every day.
No, I just did it first, and I just did it a couple of days a week. Usually always on Monday, most of the time on Wednesdays, and then whenever they needed you, pitch in, drive them to places. So you just became on the team, and there were a lot of people doing this. There was really, and again, Rich was the dean of the whole thing.
But for those who don't know Bill's story,
well, Bill's a quadriplegic, and he had a spinal cord injury from a toboggan accident his first year in the seminary up in New York, up in Poughkeepsie, New York. And almost died from it, flatlined a few times, comes back to Philadelphia, quadriplegic, healthy guy, 1 minute, quadriplegic. And when I say he couldn't move a muscle, and totally dependent on kindness of everybody else. And so he was home for a while, decided that he was going to do something. At the begining, I think he didn't know what was going to happen. Then he made a decision to go finish his seminary training.
But the Augustinians didn't know what to do with him either.
Well, I don't think anybody did. Yeah, it was again same thing. I mean, talking about like the evolution back then. That was really radical. So anyway, I get I'm meeting with him, and I'm just showing up, doing my thing. I'm just nothing. It's not rocket science. I'm just doing what I'm told. Getting him out of bed, brushing his teeth, combing his hair, putting all his braces on, and shoes, socks, pants, and the whole bit. And take him down, feed him breakfast, take him to school. He taught at Monsignor Bonner High School, so I would take him over there. So it was kind of uneventful, and I have to say I didn't know this at the time. I learned this later, but he was very, very quiet, and almost he was so introverted that you did it in silence. And I'm a talker, as you know, so I would just go in, show up, shut up, do my thing. And never really had a relationship, never developed a relationship with him. And I would talk his ear off in the morning, which he hated because I never shut up. But he just wanted to be left alone. Mm-hmm. I used to think like, well, what's wrong with this guy? And my wife says to me one day, and I said to my wife, this guy's kind of strange, doesn't speak. I said, he never talks. And my wife said, what do you think? He should be happy to see you? And he says, you're a stranger, you're coming in, he's got to have you dress him.
Yeah.
He says, that can't be fun. And when she said that to me, then I kind of shifted gears. I never thought about what it must be like. Mm-hmm. I just never thought about it. And I thought I was pretty enlightened, but to be totally dependent on other people and losing your privacy. So that was a big teaching moment for me, a learning moment for me. And my wife was a teaching moment for my wife, which she's still trying to do. But then I would say probably, and I just did it, showed up. It's just a habit. I just developed it. And you're not going to say when you're in it, oh, I don't think I want to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. You're in it. And it wasn't real taxing for me. I can't say it was just a routine that I did. And it thought I was, I have the opportunity to do it, I'll do it. So about, I would say a few years into it, one day, and at the same time, I'm a writer. I'm doing all kinds of things. Bill hears me. He says to me one day, hey, do you want to watch a basketball game tonight? And it had snowed that day. It was about 20 inches of snow. It was in February. And he wanted me to watch a basketball game one that night. So I had a 4-wheel drive car. So I said to my wife, I'm going down to see this. I don't know what's up. But I said, the guy wouldn't ask me to do anything ever. So if he did, there must be something crazy. So I go down and I sit with him and I watch a game. Same thing. We sit there in silence. Nothing happens. I get up to leave. He says, oh, by the way, he says, you write stuff, right? You're a writer. You write books and you do movies and stuff. I said, yeah, a little bit. He says, I wrote something over there. Could you read it for me? Tell me if it's any good. I had my name on an envelope. So he set this whole thing up. I go in my car, and it's freezing out, and I turn the light on, and I read these series of poems. I went back in to him. He's sitting in his living room, and I said, this is amazing. He says, oh, why? And I said, well, I just can't believe. I said, you would share such a personal thing with me. Mm-hmm. Two, I said, I really understand so much about you, and you really expressed it basically was about his doubts about his whole situation. That's what the poem was about. And
but he was a paraplegic. How did he?
He was quiet, completely quiet. 4 of them.
How did he write them?
He wrote. He would dictate to somebody else.
Oh.
Or he actually could put a glass straw in his mouth and type on a typewriter. So these stories are just all amazing. So anyway, I put that away. I said, okay. I said, so I told him it was great. I said, you should. So that was the end of that. Fast forward 2000, probably 2000, I don't care what year. I think he died 2006. 2004, he gets really sick. He gets sepsis. And he's in the hospital. And he was a teacher forever. So now he's going to require 24/7 care. So he's got to go in a nursing home. So they move him out to Villanova to the monastery where he's going to have 24/7 care. And he's very depressed. So I said, you know what you got to do? I said, you got to write a book or something. And he said, well, why would I do that? And I said, you're a quadriplegic. You're the only priest ever that was ordained. And I said, you've got to have some experiences. And I said, and by the way, you've given sermons over your time. I said, you write poetry. I said, why don't you write a little book, like a book of reflection, and we'll sell it in the St. Jude shop in Havertown. Or I said, we could put it in the vestibule of the church, and people could pay a quarter for it. If it's lousy, they'll throw it out. So he says, and it took me a couple of weeks to convince him, and so I said, I want you to try some poetry. So he did, and a couple of fits and starts. And when you put somebody on the spot like that, write some poetry, it doesn't, there's no muse, you know. So he struggled. So about a month into it, he sort of wasn't, I would say, completely enthused about the idea. And I said, look, I've always wanted to interview, and I had asked people before this, that somebody should do something with this guy's life. And I couldn't get anybody to buy into that. I said, this guy's extraordinary. Somebody should cover him somehow. And I didn't have the nerve to do it because I didn't feel I was close enough, or I didn't feel I had that access. So I said, no, why don't you write a book? And I said, and I'll lay it out for. And he said, well, I don't think I know how to write a book. I said, well, let me interview you. I said, I always wanted to ask you a bunch of questions, but I was too polite to. So we did that. We started a series of interviews. And I interviewed him for a year, a couple of days a week. And I taped it. And then I would play it, and I would transcribe it, and I would give him the copy, and he'd autograph it to make sure I didn't say anything wrong. And then I put it away. And after he died, about a year after he died, his cousins, woman Mary Moody, and this guy Rich Herron, who I was telling you about earlier, they both called me and said, we're having a memorial service. Remember that stuff you were doing? You were interviewing Bill. Can we get some of those interviews? We want to read them at this prayer service. Yeah. So I did. I gave it to him. And then Mary Moody and Rich Herron said, you got to write a book. You got to write the book. So I didn't want to do it. I had no... And then I also realized after you die, you know, your memory goes away like 3 days. Sure. And I didn't feel... So I started to write this book. And I modeled it on Tuesdays with Maury. If I said it's like, instead of a Jewish guy going to a Jewish guy and talking about Judaism, I'll go to this Catholic guy. I call it the Catholics Tuesdays with Maury. And so we did, and I put the book out, and the rest is history.
Where did the title come from?
I mean, from Helen Lafferty. Your friend Helen Lafferty gave me the title. Helen Lafferty, I was telling Helen Lafferty about it one day. If anybody doesn't know Helen, Helen was she was my boss at one time, and she was the vice president of Villanova. And I was telling her about it. She goes, you know, we were going to give him an honorary degree, and I called him and I invited him. And he said, I never eat green bananas. And she said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I might not be alive by the time they ripen. So she goes, you gotta use that title, you know? And so I said, okay, because I love you so much, I'll use the title. So that's how that happened, you know? So it was a great experience and an amazing guy. And I think people that knew him were never surprised that you know, the movement started to canonize him as saint. So no surprise there. He was extraordinary. He was an extraordinary.
In the minute or so we have left, what are you doing now?
I am doing the same thing you're doing. I'm always coming up with ideas, and I want to share them with people, and I'm making movies, and I'm writing books, stuff I love to do. But
the genre is the same. It's about
always
people who
inspire.
People
who touch me, I want to share it with people and say, man, this changed me. Maybe this will change you. And that's the movement. I mean, whether it be, you've done the same thing. Look at all the stuff you've done. We both have the same motivation. Let's make people more in tune to themselves and to others through media. And that's a great opportunity.
You've done a lot of documentaries. If you could do one documentary that would be fully funded, didn't have to worry about money, what would it be?
Boy, I don't. That's really a hard question. I guess the one I'm trying to do now. I mean, the next one I'm doing. I mean, the one that's all the others are done. So and they lose juice over time. Yeah. So you have to reinvent yourself. I think the thing I'm doing at the prison now could be interesting. I'm doing this mental health thing that I've won women's sports with Dr. Rick Eckstein, Ed Hastings, Linda Flanagan, a couple partners of mine. We're doing that now. We're just finishing that. That's really a good project. I just like a good project. If I could do one thing, I think the next person that comes in and says, I'll give you access to a great story, because you have to have access to a great story. Yeah. And people, you know, in your life, you got to get people to come clean with you. And so it's not dependent on you. It's dependent on what people give you.
Exactly.
So if you meet somebody and they want to share their story and you're there, you're just a vehicle to share it. I think that's the next one.
Steve, it's been a pleasure.
That was good.
It always is.
Always a good time.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks for having me. It's always good to be on.
My guest today has been Steve McWilliams, friend who continues to live a very purposeful life. Until next time, I'm Rick Anthony. This is 30 Minutes. Take very good care of yourselves.